Hello, hello, and welcome to Into the Nothing. And this is the first episode of 2022, which is just feels so good. It just feels really exciting. And I have a guest on today that I've had on before, and it just feels really special that this woman who is such a has had such a big impact in my life is coming back, and she's the first person I've had on twice, which just feels really, really exciting. Yeah. And it's really cool because my guest today is Rebecca Thompson, who I'll properly introduce in a moment. But yeah, you were my guest on episode number 7, and you're my guest on episode 27, which just feels it's all very aligned and very cool. But yeah, welcome back to Into the Nothing for any listeners that have been here before. We're getting some incredible downloads of this podcast, which just makes me so proud and so excited, and it's just so fun. And if you're new to Into the Nothing, this is just a conversation where we just let the conversation be what it wants to be. And Into the Nothing, I've been doing this podcast now for a year. I started it, about a year ago, just under a year. And it has shown me so much. It has revealed so much as to what nothing means. But the catalyst for this conversation today is because Rebecca has just gone into the nothing in a very tangible and practical way, which we're going to dive into. This whole episode is really about that. And who knows where this conversation will go from that. But into the nothing. So Rebecca's just gone on this 4-day experience on her own, without a journal, without her guitar, which she loves to play, and just water, not even any food. So when we talk about nothing, stripping so much out of our lives, that our lives can be so filled with so many things, and to come back to the simplicity of nothing and nature and how that really is everything, which I'm sure is going to be a key theme of this. But Rebecca, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you, darling. Oh, it's so great to be back, and congratulations on a year, because it's epic. Like doing something like this, when you put your hand up to yourself and to community and to the world and go, I'm doing this. It's one thing saying it, and there's one thing doing it, and there's one thing like following it through and being consistent. And so, yeah, well done you. And you've had some magic this year. I've caught several of those podcasts, and they've been really enlightening and beautiful. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you. I know it's
so good.
I feel like I'm in a place now where lots of parts of my life, it's just about staying the stay. It's not about like introducing a lot of new things. It's just time for me to just be in it and continue. And this is just such a, I've got on my wall next to me just my key things that I'm focusing on, and this podcast is a key part of it. So thank you. Thanks for coming.
That's so good. I mean, that's so part of that into the nothing, of not continuously thinking we have to reinvent ourselves. And we were just chatting about this literally just before. I was saying it feels like year 2022 is a year of the fruit. And even one of our beautiful beacons in our beacon community, which Patrice is part of, put a really great pictorial on a meme, of 2022 being all this fruit, coming out of at the top of this woman's head, as she's the tree of life, in the years prior leading up to that. And it really feels like this is it for a lot of us who have been doing this light work and tuning into what is the essence of what I'm here to do. And many of the times we're right here, we're right on it. Stop looking, stop trying to reinvent it, stop trying to do anything else, and just keep feeding and nurturing the brilliance of that which you are and that which you've created. And then the ripple effect just gets wider and wider. Otherwise we can disperse the energy too much.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to notice that old habit of like, okay, what's next? But there's just such a clear feeling in myself of just like, just stay. And that's such a bigger part, which just feels so nice. And at the same time, there's that little feeling inside me like, oh no, you should be taking more action and doing more things on other things. And it's, just being with that and just noticing the biggest part of me though is just stay.
Yeah. And if it's not broken, don't try and fix it. If it's working, if it feels good, and it's creating its own momentum.
Yes.
Feeding something and fueling something in the right direction to create momentum. Otherwise we've got momentum going off in all sorts of directions, and that just waters it all down.
So before we get into this conversation, for my listeners who have listened to episode 7 with Rebecca, you're going to know who this woman is in my life and just in life in general, and who she is for women. But for those who haven't listened to that episode, who are just new to this woman, I just want to give a little bit of context just so that we're all on the same page. And so Rebecca Thompson is an integrated health and personal development specialist. She is the creator of the Be a Beacon program, which I'm in, and it's for women, and it's for women who want to lead their lives with a positive impact but don't want to be in the burnout. And that's such a key part of working with Rebecca. But Rebecca is a multi-talented and world-class leader in her field, and she's an inspirational speaker, as you're going to hear in this conversation. Rebecca has 28 years under her belt in the wellness and personal development arena as a physio, yoga teacher, presence teacher, and coach. She has forged a unique and truly holistic way of working with conscious women who want to live with peace, passion, and purpose. And as I said, women who want to make a positive impact in the world, and it's without that burnout. And I know what burnout feels like. So it's very important that Rebecca's here doing this work. And so just a little context for this incredible woman. And, personally, Rebecca has now been my mentor for 2 years. I'm just about to sign up again for my 3rd year in this program, and just such a testament to the work that Rebecca has invited me into around just feeling really centered, being really connected in my body, and really living out of my head, that I just feel really calm. And I trust myself to create a podcast and do my business. I trust myself, and it really comes down to so much of what you've taught me, and I'm just so grateful. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. So welcome. It's an absolute joy having you with us in our community.
It's so cool. So let's get into it. So the reason I felt the big old nudge to get Rebecca back onto the podcast is because you have just come out of, like, literally last week, you've come out of an experience that you chose to do, where I'll you fill in all the details, but from what I know, you went to a friend's property where you could just be on your own for 4 days in nature, without anything, without your phone, obviously, even without your guitar, which I said earlier, which I know is such a big part of your life, and singing. Like, most people think, I'll go into the forest for a couple of days and just play guitar, but you're like, no, I'm just going to be with myself and nature, and that is it. And talk about into the nothing, you also removed food from your life for 4 days. So 4 days just water fasting.
Yeah.
No journal even.
Yeah.
That's like, talk to me. Why? How did this come about?
I really wanted to do a deeper practice of some sort for a while, and those that know me, and you've been around me a while, most years at the beginning of the year I do something, so I've done plant medicine 1 year, don't recommend it necessarily. I did a 3 month, like, at dawn, getting up every single day at dawn, on the beach, and going in and meditating and doing practice every single morning. Done various things, created my own retreats with friends and gone away, and just that dive into the nothing, to remove ourselves, to sort of detox our whole life, if you like, from all the external influences as much as possible, to come back to the essence of who we are, so that we can have a tangible, consistent, sustained connection to our own light source of that which we are, which is the essence of not burning out. It's not just burnout. It's like, so many people are living their life with a dimmed light, and they think there's something wrong with them, and it's nothing wrong with your light. There's just clouds. The sun doesn't cease to shine when clouds go over it. Your light doesn't cease to shine because of your situation or how you're feeling. It's about coming back to that light. And I found when I remove myself from these external influences for certain periods of time, I strengthen my light, and the clouds disperse. So that was the essence of it. And I was just getting called to do, obviously sin things around vision quests and that kind of thing before, but I didn't want to go in with a particular quest or need to have some kind of grand revelation or vision that we can get caught up in the mind and caught up in expectation. I just wanted to get so simple that it would kind of be like there was no choice but to just be in my highest self, because there was nothing else there, And so that's why I didn't want any making it easy for myself really to do that by not taking any distractions with me, like the phone, like obviously, but like even a journal, even a guitar, and the mind saying, oh, what if these amazing things come up and download and you won't remember them? Well, of course you remember them. Like if you need to remember them, they'll be there, and they have. A week later I've downloaded a lot since I've been home. But to strip everything back and to just be in nature, which is just present to itself, and to just be with that. I like to throw myself into these things as well and just see what will happen, Let's see what happens when I put myself in that particular container, and stretch myself to that next level, because I do a lot of meditation, I do a lot of this connection work, but it's always another level and another revealing. And my intention, without expectation, was to just know surrender in an even more powerful way, to know surrender and to really deepen my faith in my divinity and my intuition that speaks, through me, and getting the voice of the mind out of the way. I'm feeling that discernment even more clearly, ever more clearly.
And can you speak into that a little bit more? How you're now relating with the voice of your mind compared to the voice of your soul or your intuition? Like, can you just describe what that feels like, or what the experience is for you now?
Yeah, like, the mind, relating it to the experience that I had, I think is useful here, because I had like, I don't know how many hours are we awake for, like, I don't know, 14 hours. I'd wake at 5 or 6. I don't know what time it was. I didn't have my phone, but I didn't have a clock, but it was light. It was early. The birds were going. The cockerels were roosting next door, I knew I had, 14 hours at least up my sleeve of daylight, before I was going to, go back to bed. And my mind, it just wants to compartmentalize everything. It was going, what are you going to do for the next 14 hours? Like, you should be doing this. This is what a, your own little vision quest or retreat should look like. You should be sitting up and meditating for this amount of time. And you should be this, and, just little, not really intense, but just these thoughts of shoulds and questions. Whereas the surrendered inquiry, if you like, of the higher self, it doesn't have that questioning attitude in the same way. It's a gentler inquiry. It's like a suggestion, or just like a knowing. There are no shoulds. It's non-resisted thought. It just sort of emerges, and it has a magnetic quality to it that you feel to follow, as opposed to when the mind comes, it feels like a request that you're fulfilling somehow.
Sounds a lot softer.
It's a lot softer. You sort of feel like, oh, I'm just compelled to do that, and it feels good, and I'm just going to see where that follows. You don't have an outcome. Whereas with the mind's like, do this because you want to get that. And the soul self is just like, start with this, right? And it just follows, and you have no idea where it's going. And in that space that I was in, a lot of space, I was very aware of that. I would just stay with my breath, and not take myself into any kind of doing, even if it was meditation, because that's really all I had to do, right? And be magnetically guided or inspired to move into something, as opposed to my mind saying you should really be sitting up here and meditating, or whatever, or doing this process. And what I found was that, maybe just by starting a very gentle movement, or I did a lot of vocalizing the power of the word. Words would just come out, or chants would just start, and it would lead into something else. And all of a sudden, I'm bawling my eyes out, and I'm going, what was that phrase I just uttered that made me burst into tears? And then a little inquiry would follow, and a process would emerge, and it would all come out of nothing. It would all come out of like one little tuck and tilt movement, or one word or chant that started to come out of my mouth, and it would just unravel like this tapestry, like pull on one bit and it all goes into nothing but everything, and just flows onto the next thing. And it was incredible. Yeah.
Wow.
Incredible.
And did you have moments of being scared at night or anything? Like, could you hear any noises where you're like, or you just in such a state of surrender?
Yeah, that's not a thing for me. So I've never been afraid of being on my own or in the dark or anything like that. And I wasn't even hungry. I had a very occasional little pang of hunger, and I would just be like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I haven't felt hungry, and then drink some water. And so all of that, it was very much more just following the intuition. It was in filling up the time, right? That was the game, right, of not filling up the time and allowing, because you're watching the sun track through the sky, and like roughly kind of like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be a long day, and not buying into that, just continuously surrendering, because I asked for surrender. This was my request, and it was so interesting because I've done a lot of different fasts and cleanses before, and I've always had a lot of energy. Like after one day of feeling a bit, I have a lot of energy. And I actually cleansed through an Ayurvedic cleanse before I did the water fast. So I'd already been through my yucky, livery, I feel sick, headachy day. And I was kind of expecting to actually just feel amazing the whole week. But in this beautiful, divinely ordained experience of surrender, I was exhausted. My body, I couldn't even sit up for like 10 minutes to meditate. I would, in my, what one imagines is the perfect posture, the rules that we create for ourselves of meditating. So I had this, container of a body that was not going to sustain my expectations of being able to sit for long periods and meditate.
Wow.
And so I found that actually quite hilarious. Oh, this is perfect. So I'm lounging over my bolster. I did take a bolster and a yoga mat. I call it Ramana Maharshi style. If anyone's seen Ramana Maharshi, the great sage from Tiruvannamalai at the Shiva hill in southern India, look him up, is amazing. His main question is, who am I? That is his question for his whole lifetime. And when you see pictures of Ramana Maharshi, he's never sitting bolt upright in beautiful, equipoise lotus position. He's lounging over rocks and boulders, And so I was doing Ramana Maharshi lounging and just staying with my breath. And just staying with my breath and staying with my breath and staying with my breath. And so in all of the tools and all of the things that I have and know to do, it came back to that sort of, again, that nothingness of just staying with my breath was my mainstay. And that was the void or the vastness from which other things bubbled up to follow. But all I could do was stay with my breath. I would get up to just go to the loo or whatever, and I would literally come back and just collapse down onto my mat, like, exhausted. So it was so perfect. It was so perfect. So the big theme of that first day of the surrender and into the nothingness was the strong message that you're not your body. I'm not my body. So that whole day, different things sort of emerged around the truth of I'm not my body. And one of the things that emerged through sort of a deep body letting go, yoga nidra type practice that I felt called to do was, as I went deep into that, of just going through body awareness and sort of not dissociating, but just going so deep within that you get to the nothing. You're so deep in that there's nothing. And again, what just arose in that moment, like completely unasked for, was a little girl guide, a little kind of Asian girl guide, guiding me into these mountains and taking me through these different rites of dying through different elements, to really let go of this thought that I am my body in any way. Yeah, so that was so it was going through being buried, going through drowning, going through being strangled or being hung, and going through fire, through being burnt at the stake. And some of these are things I've touched on before that have arisen in meditations of other lifetimes, or whatever, cellular memories and all of that I'd sort of processed a little bit. So some were easier than others, and it was really this feeling of allowing the nothingness of who you really, of this body, right, just into the pure elements. And so the way I was able to transition from one death experience to the next, which sounds fun, was to become the element. Right, it was just to become the element, and just to feel myself as those different aspects. This is my carbon-based body. Yes, it's just these different elements, right? It's just made up of these different elements infused with divine life source, but essentially I'm just these elements, and what the life in this body is source. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if that made much sense.
It definitely does. It's just, wow. I just had that moment when you were telling that story. I'm just like, oh my God, this is why we're having this conversation. That's just wow. And that was just day one. Was it day one?
I think that was day one. I can't even remember. I'm pretty sure that was day one. That was day one.
Wow.
Because it very much had that flavor of just, I'm here to just surrender. I'm here to just surrender. That was the key.
For anyone that's listening right now, and this concept of surrender, I think we spoke about it in our previous episode. It's such a big concept. And for anyone that's listening right now, and even for me, like just tangibly in our day-to-day, like what does surrender look like, or what does it look like for you now? For tangibly in our day-to-day, every day, what does that feel like or look like? What's the choice in a moment of surrendering or not, if that makes sense?
Yeah, totally. I think there are so many different aspects to it. There are different ways to view it and different stages of it, I think. But, the first step is really just an allowing, I think. Whatever is in this moment, if you are in resistance to that, then you're not in surrender. Yeah. So it's an allowing, and you can feel that in your body. If you don't want something, or you want something that you don't have, if you're in resistance to something because there's an aversion, there's an attachment, there's a fear, you can feel, you need to learn to start to feel that in your body. So this is why we train ourselves in awareness, and stillness practices, because we're so caught up in the grooves of should and doing because we do, because it's what you do. And, just so caught up in those grooves that we don't even know if we're allowing something or not. We're just sort of in this flow of life, but we're not really, it's not a conscious flow. We're just in this being bashed about. So the first step has to be a choice of consciously noticing, am I in resistance here somewhere? Am I fighting something? Because that's the essence of burnout. Like, you just get exhausted by pushing it against or creating effort to try to do things, rather than allowing what is. And allowing what is isn't a resignation that this is all there is, but it's an acceptance and of allowing of this is this right now, and I can still hold the possibilities of something else. And we can only actually invite in that something else by being in no resistance. And it sounds like this crazy paradox, and people go, how do I do that? But it it's noticing, well, how does resistance show up in you? What does that feel like? Does it feel like tension in the head? Does it feel like an unease in the stomach? Does it feel like an anxious, fluttery feeling in the chest? Do I go to food when I, feel a certain way? Do I go and fall into these sort of habitual patterns to stop myself feeling the discomfort of resistance? So we have to even taste surrender, to even know what it is, we have to start being aware of how we are living our lives in these patterns that are always trying to avoid discomfort. Yeah.
It reminds me of in our other podcast episode, you were telling the story of when you were, I think, you were still a physio and you were at home with your kids and you had these overwhelming, like debilitating migraines and headaches and hoping that you had a tumor or something in your mind, in your brain, because then they could pull something out and then you would know it's over, but then they ran the tests and there was nothing. And that step of surrendering to the pain, and it was interesting because recently in the last couple of weeks, I actually had the coronavirus, and I actually slayed on my bed and I was like talking to the virus in my body and I said, just have me.
Yeah.
And I was saying, like, just take me to where you need me to go, like have me. And I had a very great experience of having the coronavirus. Like, I know that that's not everyone's experience, but mine was quite easy and I was incredibly supported and all these miraculous things happened from having the virus. It was just really special, but it was really interesting. I actually had that thought that I've learned from being with you around, like, when we're in the Be a Beacon program, there are moments when we're doing different processes and you're often like I don't know if these are your words, but this is kind of like what I feel like when you're in my mind. It's like, let it have you, like, when you're just trying to stay just above feeling whatever that feeling is, whether it's deep sadness, grief, anger, joy, whatever it is, like, you're often, we try and just avoid it and just kind of stay just outside of it, and it's almost like we're just like treading water rather than just like going all the way down, and then it just takes us and it's done.
Yes.
And so I just had in my mind, when I had the virus, I just laid on my bed, I was feeling quite exhausted, and I was actually speaking to it saying, just have me, just take me, like, what do you need?
Yes.
Totally.
Oh, I love that you did that. That's so good. I love that you did that in those moments, because it's in those moments when we're in pain that we often forget these things, right? We grasp again onto the needing to fix, forgetting that the way to heal, the way to transcend and transform is through surrender. It's the only way, right? Really. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just a lot harder and we're not really healing and transcending on all levels, maybe just on the physical, or maybe just on one, but not on all. If you want it all, then the only path is through surrender. So good. So good. And it's the remembering that all our pain and suffering is just an illusion from the mind anyway. So the more we try and grasp onto something or get something or fix something through the cognitive, mind, we're just creating more of the suffering. It just shifts a little sideways sometimes. We move through something, but we haven't actually really dealt with it. We're just shifting it into another scenario, whether it's pain through work difficulties or relationship difficulties or health difficulties. What I've noticed is when I can truly surrender in one area. It's only true surrender if I see the expansion happening in all areas of my life. Otherwise, I've just pushed in one area to create a change through effort. And we talk about this difference between effort and tapasya. So effort is sort of a mental effort that comes into the doingness in the body, that is a need to have a particular outcome. And tapasya is sitting in the discomfort of whatever is until the heat of that presence and surrender creates a change. And I think until you've been guided through that, and this is where community and mentors are always so important, is we have a fear around going there. Like you say, it's like we don't want to surrender. It's like we're paddling, you know, like I'm only going to surrender so far. I'm only going to surrender so far because I'm just going to die is the ultimate fear. We don't cognitively think I'm going to die, but if you know, when we process down, that is the root fear. But the fear is I have to control this. I'm going to get overwhelmed by this feeling. I'm not going to be able to cope. I'm going to fall apart. I'm going to have a breakdown. I'm going to, you know, never going to be able to pick myself up. And that's only true if we're still holding on. If we're still holding on, it's like, yeah, it's like you get dragged down into that vortex, you know. I'm imagining someone in a vortex, you know, thrown out of a boat, because this happened to me once when I was whitewater rafting and stupidly wore DM Martin boots, and I was like getting dragged down into the vortex, you know, and I'm desperately trying to get out of the vortex. It's a bit like that with the tides, you know. No, you've got to let the rip take you. You've got to let it take you, let it do its process you and spit you out the other side cleansed. The more you fight, the more you're going to just be dragged down into the pit of despair and see, I told you it's a real shit fight down here, you know, like, until someone's held you through that and you felt that shift that happens when you do surrender and you allow yourself to go all the way in. There's a real presence that's needed to allow that. And it's that presence that is the light of who you are that allows the pain of your suffering, which is only an illusion anyway, from the mind to just fracture into all its little pieces, because it's not real. And then all you're left with is the realization that you are perfection and oneness. And then all of a sudden you're like, it's indescribable, really, that.
There's a visualization that you have shared with the women in the Be a Beacon program, and I really love it. And I just always think about it, and I always speak to my clients about it around, you know, just staying on your path and one foot in front of the other. And often the obstacles that we can see in front of us, you know, you just keep staying the stay, just keep, you know, I guess, you know, being in your body and being in the center of your body and being connected, and you just keep on your path and keep taking the step. And when you get to the so-called obstacle, whatever that is in life, so often you get there, and often it's like what I often experience in that visualization is that it's like a hologram. I often feel like I can just end up walking straight through it, or like you often say, there's a path that opens up to go over it or under it or around it. Or it's so interesting that you know, we can be so terrified in life of this obstacle or this challenge or this thing. And it's something that I've learned by being with you, is to just keep staying in your path, staying in your body, just keep taking the next step, and then the next one, and then the next one. And you suddenly get to these obstacles. And for example, coronavirus for me was something that I was avoiding, and I live in Queensland, and we've been so unaffected in so many ways in comparison to other places in Australia and the world. And I was in my bubble, and it was so interesting. I get down to Sydney and I immediately got it. Like I almost got it straight away, you know, like this thing that I was avoiding. I love the quote, you know, whatever we're hiding from will chase us, and whatever we're chasing will hide from us. You know,
perfect.
I was hiding from, you know, I'm in Queensland or my family, like so much drama. And then I got it. And this obstacle that I thought it just wasn't. And it just opened up so many conversations that I was avoiding with my family and with friends around so much of all of the different parts of what's going on in the world. And I just had to have all these conversations, and it just opened up so much. It just opened up so much intimacy and this really beautiful time in my family. But it was just this obstacle that I was avoiding. You know, I had to face it. I had to go through it. Like you said, the only way out is through. I had to, whatever that was for me, my path at the time, but it wasn't the obstacle that I thought it was. It's been such a gift.
Through the eye of the needle. And it is that complete surrender. And I was just thinking as you were saying that, you know, that again, that step by step that I just had to, you know, we struggle as humans to trust our intuition because it's so clouded, you know, with our mind and all the shoulds and all of the peer pressure, you know, and let alone social media and news and all of that, but all the ways we're conditioned to act, to defend ourselves health-wise or whatever, you know, all of these different things, and not coming to the sovereignty of, well, what is right for us. And that's not a truth that's the same for everyone, right? It's a very individual space of what you're here to learn, you know. Each of us are here to learn. And But yeah, just with that step by step thinking of the water fast, you know, it was so much that of not projecting into the future and just fully surrendering into this moment. Otherwise it was like, well, God, I'm doing this now. What am I going to do in the next 2 hours? You know, like I'm exhausted now, like just projecting ahead rather than staying next step, just breathe. That's the next step, is just to breathe. Next step, breathe. Next step, breathe. And just see again what arises in the complete surrender, because that is the only place that real truth for you, you know, can emerge from, that's untainted, you know, by any other influence that is limited. It's always limited. Any other influence is always limited, because it's limited based on what you've already experienced and what your mind can comprehend and what your mind believes to be true. And that's finite, you know.
And we spoke about it a little bit before we started and we hit record, but you were just talking about some changes that you're noticing in yourself, in your day-to-day, since doing the 4-day experience in the water fast and being on your own in simplicity and in nature. Can you just share some of those little things that you're noticing in yourself, where you're hearing your mind and how you're acting now?
Yeah, and it's very much layers, isn't it? Like, they're not sudden things that are new to me that weren't there before, but they're deepenings. You know, I used to remember when I'd come back from retreats. I've been running and, you know, hosting retreats and helping at retreats for like so many years. And I used to come home and really struggle with that integration. You know, I would feel changed somehow, and yet my environment that I'm coming back into with kids and husband and all that feels not changed. And then I would sort of feel the resentment and the difficulty and feel like I was compromising myself and trying to re-assimilate, right? So it used to sort of be part of my experience. And over the years, that's got better and better and better. And just what I noticed, again, even more so this time, was just, you know, my capacity for such gratitude and seeing the love that's around me in so many places, in different flavors, because, you know, sometimes we want to receive things in a certain way, but actually it's being presented in a different way. It's not seeing it, because we have in our mind a way that we want to receive it, right? But it's actually still there in different ways. And I think that's particularly, you know, with family and different personalities, right, that go on, that we're all quite different. And so coming back this time, so much love, so much compassion, so much gratitude for my family. And so, of course, I came back into just such a beautiful, supportive, yummy, connecting, you know, day and evening. Like my landing back was so gracious and so easeful and so lovely. You know, there was none of that. Everything, it felt like everything had up leveled with me, because of course we're not separate. And I think when we first start on this spiritual journey, we're just dealing with ourselves, you know, and as we move along, it's not just the I. We realize that the I is the we. And so, you know, our processes start to involve not just us, but yeah, I'm doing this for the benefit of all, and my family and all of my community and for the whole world. And so you see your whole world up level, right? Not just you back in a normal world, right? Once we get this deeper sense of connection. So some other beautiful things have just sort of shifted in different things I wanted to, because I'm always running things in different ways, that I wanted to create a few supportive gatherings that were not led by me, that were supportive and nourishing for me as well, have just naturally come to pass. And everyone's super excited about being connected in with that, and just coming back in some effortless magnetism in my business of beacons just dropping in and, you know, signing up and paying and doing their contracts all just like effortlessly. Things just so much, you know, ease. Just so much ease, and just an ever deeper sense of peace, and the not needing to chase anything, not needing to have to do anything. There are no shoulds. It's just allowing those impulses and realizing, you know, we were talking about this, you know, all the years that I've sort of grown my business to where it is now, it's really at a place that is bearing fruit, and it's fairly effortlessly, and there's nothing I need to do. And the mind keeps often dropping in with oh, but you could do this. I could do my own podcast. I don't want it, but I'm quite happy to talk at other people's. Different things that the mind pops in with, like, oh, you could be doing this, you could be doing this. But allowing the fullness of the fruition of what I've created, this amazing sort of tree of life, and just enjoying that. And I feel like I have space that has been created for other creative pursuits that I want to follow as well, which are going to be, real enrichment to this, but it's going to need a little bit of space around that to really work with that. And it feels so much more freeing having been on this water fast. It was sort of already there, but it's like, yeah, you can trust this. You can trust what you've created here. This is solid, right? Well, the support's here for you. You've done it, right? You just keep it going. It's fine. And the support is here for you now to play in these other areas. And the mind junk that likes to often come in and argue the point on that sometimes, right? As it's got even quieter, which is great.
Sounds like you just had the reset of all resets, and you already have obviously a very strong internal foundation. You've done a lot of work on yourself, and you're so in this work, but it's just like this. It sounds like, I don't know, when I in my mind, or when I picture you out there, it just feels like just the cleansing of all cleanse, just like so pure, not eating and just being in nature for 4 days away from everything. It's just this reset to, and something that you always talk about is to see clearly, like so many of these things, as you were saying, it were already here, but it's just like the clutter or the clouds or whatever was kind of standing in the way, that the debris that was there has just been cleansed and detoxed, so you can actually just really walk your higher self path, your infinite self path, because even more profoundly and even more relaxed, because there's just so much trust.
A sense of so much more trust, like we trust, and we do, and get here otherwise, and be doing what we're doing with the health and vitality and abundance that I'm experiencing. But it's just even more, especially when we're in the world of social media marketing, there's always that dangerous vortex of comparing yourself to what others are doing, right? And trusting that what you're doing is perfect for who you are and how you're here to express in the world, and what your own unique stretches and your own unique gifts are, and to really be strong in that knowing and unwavering in that knowing, so that you can still play in the world and not have to shut yourself off from those influences, but just go, no, I trust completely that this is exactly what I need to be doing. And I think being able to follow those deep impulses with going into the nothing for those 4 days, I'm having seen what evolved, through that time, and how perfect it freaking was, to be able to trust that I can still do that in life, and I have been doing that. And it's again deeper and deeper again, that there's just less interference, right? Less, if you think about, our vibration being this pure radiant light, and it's vibrating at a certain level, then, and all the mind junk and all the interference from the world and environment and all of this creates like static on the line, this interference and resistance of the messages getting through. And it's just like all of that, just, every time we deepen our practice, every time we have this up leveling, it's like less and less of this interference gets through. Like you're actually, that the strength of your signal on this other wavelength is now impenetrable by, the static from elsewhere. Yeah. And that's what happens. And of course, along with that is just so much more energy. And along with that is the willingness to treat this body, really well, to sustain this temple that, your soul has chosen to hang out in this lifetime. And, all of that goes along with it, which just feels good, like a renewed joy in the beingness in the world, and all the beauty and the fun and the joy and everything just seems so bright, and beautiful.
Oh my gosh, so magnificent. And what advice would you give to anyone who is loving this idea, and what sort of, I guess, practical things they need to be aware of, like, because you've obviously done a lot of fasts and different things in your time, and you know, you went to a friend's property, so there's like an element of safety. Is there anything, you know, for anyone who's interested, what advice would you give them to just for them to go into the nothing and just spend time with the truth of who they are, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite, individual in terms of how I would probably answer that, because it really depends on how comfortable you are, with yourself, and how much work. I don't like to create a hierarchy around it, but it's going to bring some stuff up. It's useful to have those tools to really be able to sit with yourself. Otherwise, it's a really long amount of time to just be abandoning yourself out. And I think don't create too many rules around it. Like, yes, I went with nothing, and I wasn't going to even go with a tent, but it was while we had all those like winds and rainstorms. And so I'm going to take a tent, I'm going to take a yoga mat and a bolster. Like, I'm not going to do this like ridiculously hard. It's hard enough having nothing and just water. I'm going to take a kettle so I can have warm water and cold water. So there was like, allow some softening for where you're at, rather than always creating these like full on hard edges that push yourself, beyond perhaps where you're able to go. You want stretch, but you don't want to be pushing into resistance. Like, you should be doing it this way. All right. It's trust yourself in terms of the container that you want to create for yourself. Just because I said I did it this way doesn't mean you have to do. And this is the thing with, juice fast or this or that or whatever. It's like, oh, there's a formula, I need to follow it. Well, we have to allow for our own personal needs. I found, for example, like juice fasting didn't serve me. It made me too light, actually, back some years ago now. I wasn't ready for that amount of lightness. It actually created quite a lot of anxiety in my body, because I have a lot of fire in my body. So putting a lot of air in when I have a lot of fire actually created more anxiety, right? So, Ayurvedic cleanses I've always found to be really gentle and really beautiful across the board. And you can check out like Khichdi cleanses, which I get my beacons to do, because it's something that everyone can do that's really safe, no matter what kind of environment you're needing to do it in, that suits every body type. So I would really just do some sort of self-exploration into what type of cleanse is feeling appropriate for you, and don't feel like you have to create like really strict rules around that. If you haven't done something like this before, just do it for a day, just do it for a couple of days. Don't take yourself off remotely, just do it at home and tell everyone you're going to be quiet for a day. Like, just ease yourself into it. If you've kind of done lots of things, and you want to go for it, then go for it. And then, yeah, like I say, just basic safety guidelines, like letting people know where you are. And like I chose to do, it was like a 10-15 acre property, so I was far enough away that I could run around naked and sing and chant and scream to my heart's delight without anyone getting in the way or thinking anything. So you want that sense of complete freedom, but to still have that kind of that backup. Yeah. It all comes down to really listening to yourself, doesn't it? And we're doing these practices in order to be able to hear ourselves more, but so that's the paradox again. But to tune in. There are never any shoulds. You don't have to ever do a cleanse to get enlightenment. It's just something that can be useful to clear away some of those clouds. Clear away some of that clutter. Yeah. So be kind, ease in gently. Don't go hard and fast, particularly if you're, like I say, I eased into the water fast by doing my Ayurvedic cleanse for 3 days before, so that I would, get the biggest chunk out of my system in terms of what I knew. I would tend to go very hard and fast, like, one cleansing tea and I'm like, oh, liver's gone into detox, So you can start to like know yourself as to how your body responds to these things, and just go nice and gently.
I love that. And sorry, you go.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, just don't have expectations. Don't go in needing a particular outcome, because, you're already starting off with that bit of resistance. I'm doing this in order to get that, whether, it might be some people do a cleanse to lose weight, or for a particular health issue, or to find the answer to something. And I've just often found that, this sense of surrender and whatever is for my highest good, may it be so, like I'm ready to experience what is the highest I need to be shown right now. Otherwise, we can just be digging and seeking and, looking for that one thing, and it ends up becoming an unfulfilling experience, because we may not get what we thought we needed or wanted out of it. And maybe the divine's got another thing in mind for you.
Yeah. And thank you for that. That's really helpful. And yeah, I haven't done, been in nature just on my own, but I did do a 3-day water fast last year, and I prepped for it for 2 to 3 weeks, actually. Like the people that were running it for different reasons, they kept moving the date back, and it really worked in my favor because my body was so prepped that the 3 days was actually quite easy, because I had prepped for a couple of weeks of removing gluten, and I don't drink alcohol or caffeine, but moving meat and all sugar and everything. And so I was going into it, I was very prepared. My body was not in a state of shock. So that was a way of being really kind to myself, of not just going, oh, tomorrow I'm going to do a water fast, and you've just come out of Christmas and you've been eating ham and
totally yeah. You've really got to you got to think about it on all levels. Are you mentally prepared? I'd been doing I could feel the prep. I think when you plan these things a little ahead, life preps you, like you say, it worked out perfectly in your favor, and things worked in my world in order to bring stuff up for me that I was all actually processing before I went, and journaled before I went, and some initiations that I do were all perfectly timed and placed to kind of lead you into the place that you need to be. And I think trust that you're going to have your own experience. I'd never experienced that much fatigue before, and don't judge yourself for that. It was like the perfect experience that I needed to have this time, and I'm not going to have that same experience ever again, because you need to have the experience you need to have at any moment, right? It's the lesson that you need in that moment. And so again, don't get into the judgments and comparisons of whatever someone else may have told you about their experience. That's why it's so good to just go and be open, be gentle, lead into it, plan it out a little bit, and then allow it.
Oh, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. It's been so wonderful. I feel like we could always just talk for hours. I have one final question for you, just coming off the back of this incredible experience, is just in this moment, what does nothing feel like for you? Like when you go into the nothing, what are some words that starts to come up when I ask that question?
I think the problem with going in, not the problem, but the problem with words when you go into the nothing is the words tend to kind of evaporate in the nothing. But it's really, I don't know. Words just don't really do it justice, because you say these words like it's everything and nothing, but that's sort of what it feels like. There's a vastness, but there's a lightness, but it's so tangible at the same time.
Just beyond.
They're really they're just, it's so, I always feel this, it's almost like we talk about that the womb, the darkness and the womb and the void is kind of like the source of everything. And then the light even emerges out of that, which is such a beautiful analogy for us and our own issues and our darkness, and that we have to move through that in order for the light to be born, and for us to see that and to come back to that. And that's really how the universe is. And so it's kind of like I feel all of that simultaneously, and none of that, and it's stillness, but it's also movement of all these different things, and all these different archetypes and all these different images that I associate with all this, and that I've worked with, kind of move through. And but then it's also just that inky deep vastness, and it's the light, and it's movement, and it's stillness, and it's all of those paradoxes, it's all of those polarities really just in one. It's not static. It's not static. It's undefinable. It's the nature of it.
It feels like it just makes this being in your, I don't know, for me, and what I've experienced in myself around feeling this and experiencing the nothing, which is again like what the fuck, it's just for whoever's listening, for us all to experience for ourselves and whatever that feels like. But it just it for me, it invites me even more into this human experience, like just to be even more just Makes me feel just very human, you know, like you go all the way there and you're just like, oh, I just want to be here and just live and take action and do the things I want to do. If that,
it does, it feels more juicy. Like the words that's coming to me is just this juiciness and pleasure. And when I was sharing some of my experience with the beacons the other day, it was sort of like, you know, when we do fully surrender, it's really pleasurable. Like I think that's the other feeling of it, of the nothing. It's a quiet joy, you know. There's that, and when we have that experience and come back into the body, I can see your face as you were saying that, you know, it's just so fun then to be in your body and have these experiences, and with a heightened awareness, it's kind of like everything's brighter, everything, you can sense everything more, everything tastes better, everything is, you know, you can infuse pleasure and joy even in the most mundane activities when you've tasted this nothingness.
I feel like everyone's going to be like, I need to go into the forest now for 4 days.
Yeah,
it's so amazing. Thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. It's just so special to have you here always. And yeah, and of course I'll drop all of your social links down below.
Cool.
So people can connect with you. But just thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for inviting me. It's fresh off the fast.
I know.
Yeah.
I feel like we're very lucky because we really get to have you when you're just in that full, just, yeah, as you said, fresh off the fast, just in that full expansion. So cool. So thank you. And thank you to everyone for listening. And yeah, if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it. Please share it on your socials. Please tag Rebecca and myself. Let us know if there's anything that you got out of it. If there's anything you're curious about, we're here for conversations in our inboxes. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and just thank you so much for tuning in, and happy new year. 2022 is here.
Yeah, happy new year, everyone. Hope 2022 is going to be epic.
I think
222. It's a 6, so you know, a little bit more of a container there, I think.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone.
Nice.
Thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome. Much love.